Good evening, and welcome to Money Matters. My name is Kimon Hatza, and I'm a business attorney at GrowthCounsel in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. GrowthCounsel is a business law boutique that focuses on business transactions for its clients. We represent a variety of clients across industries, including life sciences and technology companies. For those companies, we principally do financing and mergers and acquisitions transactions. Tonight, we're continuing our series on life sciences and technology leaders in the Delaware Valley. Before we get started, I want to remind our viewers that from time to time, financial issues relating to life sciences or technology companies or matters may be discussed on the show. These discussions are not and should not be viewed as financial advice. Moreover, since the show is pre-recorded and shown at a later time, the information may no longer be current. You should always check with your financial advisor before entering into any financial transactions. I'm happy to have with me this evening as my co-host Charlie Huntington. Charlie is the head of public relations for Life Sciences PA. Life Sciences PA is the voice of advancement for the life sciences in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Charlie, thanks for co-hosting.
Sure. Thanks, Kimon.
Well, we're entering into the fall, and I know there's a lot of things on the agenda for Life Sciences PA, so I was wondering if you might take a couple of minutes and tell our viewers about that.
Happy to. I'd like to highlight two events. One of them is happening on November 12th at Life Science PA's headquarters, 650 East Swedesford Road in Wayne, Pennsylvania, from 8 to 9:30. It's an open house, so there's no charge, so members and friends of Life Sciences PA can stop by. There will easily be 200 people there, but it's a nice place before you go to work to stop by and see many of the people who come through Life Sciences PA throughout the year. There's another event, which is Life Sciences PA's Holiday Mixer. That's on the 18th of December. It will be late afternoon. We don't have the exact times yet, but watch the website for that, lifesciences, plural, pa.org.
Do you know where that one will be held?
Yes, that will also be at Life Science PA's headquarters, 650 East Swedesford in Wayne.
All right. Well, thank you for that. I'm
Sure.
looking forward to it. Before we get to our guest tonight, and we have a wonderful guest this evening, I want to remind our viewers that if you have a question that you would like to ask us on a future show, watch this video to see how you do it.
You can have your questions answered on Money Matters. Please go to our website, money-matterstv.com. On our homepage, click on the banner on the right that says, Send us your questions. While you're on our website, you can find information about our host and guests, as well as show notes and links about this show and past shows. Money Matters is also available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so you can listen to Money Matters while you're on the go. That website address, again, is money, M-O-N-E-Y, -matters, M-A-T-T-E-R-S, TV.com.
I'd like to introduce now our special guest this evening, Dr. Martin Phillips. Dr. Phillips is the CEO of OPSIDIO, LLC. It's an early-stage pharma company developing monoclonal antibodies for the treatment of human fibrotic and modeling diseases. We'll break that down for you later in the show. He's also the founder of Tarnheim Therapeutics, a company that creates value for inventors, shareholders, and research institutions by developing early-stage monoclonal antibody therapeutics into pharmaceutical candidates. Early in his career, Dr. Phillips worked in academia at both Baylor College of Medicine and at the University of Texas Medical School, where he had teaching, research, and clinical responsibilities. He left academia for the pharmaceutical industry, where he held executive positions of increasing responsibility, such as medical director, senior medical director, vice president of clinical research and development, chief medical officer, and senior vice president of clinical development, among others, for companies like Aventis Behring, Morphotek, and Ateracor, before becoming an entrepreneur at OPSIDIO. Dr. Phillips also serves on the boards of Philabundance, Mid-Atlantic BioAngels, and Context Therapeutics. He's also an advisor to Integral Molecular. Martin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kimon, for that introduction that my father would have been proud of and my mother would have believed.
I noticed that you have your Philabundance pin on your lapel. I was wondering if you might want to take a minute and tell us a little bit about the organization and what it does.
Well, thanks. And thank you for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here. Philabundance is a operation we've been in operation about 30 years, a food rescue operation whose mission is to end hunger for good in the Delaware Valley. We distribute about 30 million pounds of food every year, mostly in this area, to people in need, and hunger is a remarkably big problem, and it's really an honor to be part of the organization.
That's great. It's a wonderful organization. Let me turn to your background. What first attracted you to a career in the life sciences?
You know, it's one of those things that you just gravitate towards, and I found that I really enjoyed biology. I really enjoyed the biology side of science. I guess I think in a fairly, shall we say, linear or logical fashion, and just enjoyed it more and more going through college, and ended up in medical school.
Now, I mentioned during your introduction that you were both at Baylor Medical as well as the University of Texas Medical School, and you had teaching and research and clinical responsibilities at both. How did your experience, and then you left academia to go to the pharmaceutical industry. How did your experience at Baylor and at the University of Texas help prepare you for that transition?
Well, academia doesn't really prepare you for industry. There are some different skill sets, but really what was extremely valuable in academia was working with, first in the clinical side, working with top-notch physicians, so just working with a team of healthcare professionals that are just outstanding in their field, always intellectually challenging, difficult cases. And so that's a very important skill to have in pharma, because you really understand what the end users are, what your patients, the end users of your products, what they need, and why a product would be important to them. Mm-hmm. I was very fortunate to be able to do research, and that was very, very valuable, at least for what we're doing now in OPSIDIO, because understanding what the scientists are doing and having tried to do it myself in the past, again, you have an appreciation for what they're doing and how it will work. And teaching is, I hope I was good at it. It's a valuable skill.
So what led you to transition to the pharmaceutical industry?
Well, that was pretty straightforward. This was the mid-'90s, after the '80s and early '90s. The funding had all gone from the NIH. And for a young MD with no PhD, the probability of getting funding and staying funded was statistically indistinguishable from zero. So I looked at other opportunities. And I had an almost chance meeting with one of the senior executives of what was then Scention and became Aventis Behring and is now CSL, which is a major company in our area here. And he really got it about research and the things that I was interested in. And that conversation just turned into a job over time.
So you had, as I mentioned earlier too in the introduction, you had a lot of experience at an executive level at a variety of companies in the pharmaceutical space. And some of them were significant companies. What led to your transition to, why did you want to become an entrepreneur, I guess, for a company like OPSIDIO?
Entrepreneurism is just something that you have it or you don't. And if you like fast decision making, taking responsibility, and really seeing your fingerprints on everything that goes out the front door, it's a very rewarding experience.
How did your experience with the larger pharmaceutical companies help prepare you for your role as the CEO of an early stage pharmaceutical company?
One of the most valuable things that I got out of pharma, and it blindsided me as to how valuable it is the ability to work in teams. When you're working in academics as a clinician, you're a solo performer, and you've got to be excellent at it. But you get good at being a solo performer. Working in pharma was the first time I'd worked in teams and had experts in their own fields. I had 3 terrific bosses, still in touch with a couple of them, and just learned a lot about how to work in a team situation, and rely on colleagues, and as I say, I was very fortunate to have great teachers there who happened to be my bosses and really led me through that.
So getting to trust people and rely on other people was I guess if you're working by yourself and you're doing research by yourself and things like that, that's something that you have to learn to get comfortable with.
Absolutely. Academia is a lot of $500,000 to a few $1 million businesses that happen to be housed in the same building, because you might be studying disease A, Charlie might be looking at phenomenon B, and I'd be looking at something else, but we'd each be running our own little corporation with hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars worth of grants and other kinds of funding, and you're only responsible for your fiefdom. Whereas when you're in a team effort in pharma or in many other large organizations, you have to understand how to interact with other people. You still have to be an excellent performer, but you need to make the whole greater than the sum of the parts.
One last question before Charlie has some questions for you. What would you say is the most challenging aspect of your job as CEO?
It's always you're resource limited, whether it's human resource, time, financial resources, and making the best use of what resources you have so that you can advance the project to the next stage, attract more investment, attract other talent. And it's definitely how do you allocate your resources, personal, financial, and how do you best deploy people so that you will get the most bang for the buck.
Martin, let's focus on OPSIDIO. What are the company's areas of focus?
Well, we're developing a monoclonal antibody that came out of the University of Michigan, and we'll talk a bit about that. And this monoclonal antibody is working at a very important node in a lot of chronic inflammatory diseases. And there are a number of drugs out there that are better than the ones I had when I was in practice, but we think this is a very important node, and we've got a lot of animal models that and bench studies that show it. Chronic inflammation takes a lot of different forms, and it's one of our challenges actually is that this is at the nexus of a lot of diseases that you wouldn't necessarily think were related to each other. So asthma, atopic dermatitis, kidney disease, pulmonary fibrosis, scleroderma, and other diseases like that. Chronic inflammation can lead to scarring of an organ, which is called fibrosis. And that's where we started. But as we've peeled back the layers of the onion, we found out how many chronic inflammatory diseases this particular pathway is important in. And the solution that our scientific founders came up with is really elegant. And monoclonal antibodies as a class are very, very specific, lock and key specificity. So if a disease can be treated with a monoclonal, although to be sure they're expensive, complicated therapies, but if they can be treated with a monoclonal, it's a real advantage because everything you see is due to the pharmacology of the antibody you're giving. You don't see a lot of off-target effects.
So not a lot of side effects. It really focuses on whatever the problem is.
Right, and the side effects you see actually are the pharmacologic effects. So it's not an accident like it is if you take too much Tylenol and you blow up your liver. It's that, for instance, you see something like Humira advertised on TV, and at the end they say certain infections may occur, or tell your doctor you've had that infection. Because it suppresses the immune system, it's an intended effect of the drug. It's not an accident, but still there are downsides to them. But all that being said, they are generally very well tolerated and very specific and often highly effective.
Does the company have any proprietary intellectual property?
Yes. So since our founders all worked our scientific founders all worked for the University of Michigan, very typically in academics, what happens is if you have an invention, you report it to the Office of Technology Transfer. They take out the initial patent, and then the university owns that, and then we license that technology worldwide, exclusive, of course, from Michigan, and our scientific founders are still very much involved with the company.
So in what stage right now would this technology be?
We are still in what they call preclinical, meaning that we still haven't used it in humans.
Okay.
We have done a great deal of bench work, animal work, test tube kinds of experiments to show its mechanism and its efficacy in model systems. But the next thing is that we need to do is manufacture enough of it at a quality that it can be given to people. And for these biologic drugs, that's a very expensive proposition. So we're looking for a partner, either venture capital or a pharma partner, to help with that.
So my assumption is that is something that would need to go through the FDA.
Absolutely. So there's sort of two gates at the FDA. The first one is what we call an IND, or Investigational New Drug Application, and that is you put together a package showing that it's effective in, you think it's going to be effective for where you're going to take it into people, and that you've manufactured it to a certain quality, and you've done formal toxicity testing to a certain quality. And you put that package together, and then you open this investigational new drug application, which is permission to use it in people. And then after you do the usual phase 1, 2, and 3 studies in people to show it's effective, then after that you get a license application, and for chemicals it's called a new drug application, or an NDA. For biological antibodies it's called a biologics license, or a BLA.
Okay. What other uses could you potentially see for this technology?
Well, that's interesting, because that's both a strength and a challenge for us. Because this may work our antibody may work in diseases that are apparently unrelated. It's been one of our challenges has been to pick one of the model systems, and it turns out that different investors are interested in different things. Venture investors want a quick base hit so that you can show this actually has some value, and maybe it'll do all these other things in the future, but we can show in a short time that it has some efficacy, perhaps not even in a major disease. Pharma generally swings for the fences because they have the resources to take on the major diseases that are still challenging. And threading the needle through all that because we're talking, as I say, we talk both to venture and we talk to pharma. Threading the needle has been a challenge, but I think we understand everybody's needs now, and we've got a package of data that works for everybody.
So we're a Philadelphia-based show, and your organization, OPSIDIO, is based in Philadelphia. How important is this region to OPSIDIO's success?
This region is terrific because of the long history of the major pharma companies in Philadelphia. There's an enormous amount of institutional knowledge, always people around who've done whatever it is you're doing, so you can call them up, go have coffee with them, consult with them, whatever. And so the people in this area are fantastic, and that really has been, and it's also a two-way street, because as you mentioned, I advise other people and that sort of thing. It's a great infrastructure in this area, which is doing nothing but growing.
Martin, how are you currently being funded?
So we started out with friends and family, and then we've gotten grants and to do some of the work, and then one of our local early stage investors, a company called BioAdvance, led a seed round, and so we're working on seed money right now, and we're using that now to find the big infusion that we're going to need to manufacture, do the formal toxicity testing, and then take it into people, which will be about 15 months once we get funded.
And that was the funding you referenced earlier, with either from venture capital or perhaps a partner in the pharmaceutical industry?
Right. Well, BioAdvance is a small venture
Right.
firm who specialize in very early stage technologies and pretty much in this area as well. But then for the amounts of money we need for the next stage, we need to talk to either big pharma or to the national and international venture firms.
I see.
They've been a pretty important validator, as we've seen many of the companies, many of the ideas that have come through the studio have received money from BioAdvance, and it's been an important point of validation before other funding sources get in their jet stream and get them funded.
BioAdvance has, they've seeded 50 to 60 companies in this area, and I don't know precisely how many exits they've had, but it's
They've
in
had
the
some
dozens.
nice ones.
It's in the low dozens. It is a very important validator, and they've been a very important linchpin for the life sciences in this area.
Are there competitive products that are currently in your space, the space that you're focused on?
Yeah, if there aren't any competitive products, you're in the wrong place. And there are some pretty effective ones, although our mechanism of action is upstream from everything else that we know about. It really it's elegant in that it is upstream, but it works locally, only where the inflammation is, because it suppresses the signal that the inflammation starts. A number of the other competing technologies, thank you, they will deplete one of the messengers of the immune system throughout the whole body, or they'll deplete a certain kind of cell from the body, where ours just works locally by preventing the initial signals from ever leaving that area, so it keeps it local. But exactly to that example, our scientific founders started out studying allergic asthma because, asthma, well, most people are just controlled with an inhaler and they do fine. But there's a subset of people, including kids, unfortunately, who still die from asthma, who have serious asthma. Until 5 or 8 years ago, that hadn't changed from when I was in practice 20 plus years ago. But now there are 4 biologic drugs approved in asthma, and they're very effective. So we're no longer, although we have a great deal of efficacy in asthma, that's not one we're targeting, because being fifth to the party is a bit on the late side.
And for our viewers, biologic is a synthetic? What does that mean?
Biologic, yeah, it's like an antibody. It
Okay.
is. These antibodies are like a substance that your body would normally make. So
Okay.
when you go and get the flu vaccine, your body develops antibodies against flu. When your body develops antibodies against a vaccine or against an infection, they're what we call polyclonal, many clones that attack different parts of the invader. But about 50 years ago, a couple of people got a Nobel Prize for figuring out how to take one of those and amplify it, and that's what gives you the lock and key specificity, because we
Okay.
knew exactly which part of this molecule we were going to target, and then developed the antibody exactly against that.
Okay.
Then you're not destroying the rest of the cell or whatever.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
What are the biggest barriers to the industry that you're focusing on, to entry, I guess, into the industry?
Well, there's a lot of competing technology. There's a lot of good ideas out there that are being developed, and pharma has limited resource, as much as anything, human resource, because they can only devote time to so many projects. So they need to be very focused, very careful that they're picking what they think is the best one. And although we spend 95% of our waking hours thinking about how wonderful this system is, they just don't know what they're missing. So packaging our extensive amount of data in a way to show them that this really can compete efficiently for their resources. And with venture, again, they've got a limited pool of funds. They need to deploy it to the things that are going to be the biggest payoffs in the shortest period of time. So getting noticed in the sea is hard, but we're in diligence with several firms at this point and gotten that attention. We're very glad about that.
What would success look like for OPSIDIO?
Having the first patient who gets up, their life is better or longer because they took our drug.
Okay.
And hundreds of thousands after that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right. So your co-founder, Dr. Nicholas Lucas, is a professor of pathology at University of Michigan. And he also helped spin the technology out of the university for OPSIDIO to get that company started. How did you meet Dr. Lucas?
Nick and I met through our network. We just had common friends, and I was working part-time for AterraCore, which is now Molendo, which is in Ann Arbor. And he needed somebody who knew something about developing antibodies. So we met, and pretty soon I was very fascinated with what they were doing. They seemed to be tolerating me, so we went into this venture together.
Can you describe for us, Martin, what the program was at Michigan that allowed you guys to take this transfer, or take the technology and transfer it out?
Sure. Well, Nick and his colleagues, Corey Hogeboom and Steve Kunkel, were studying allergic asthma, and they're immunologists. And they were looking at really specifically what happens when you get allergic asthma. Why do you get it? What cells are involved? How can we block it? And pretty early on, they noticed that the cells that were most active in their animal models all responded to a similar signal. And so they started looking at what that signal was. And the solution they found was hiding in plain sight. People had known that there were two forms of this signaling molecule, and people knew that this signaling molecule was involved in chronic inflammation, but they were the first ones to put it together to say, this form of it is only used in inflammation, this form of it is only used in the many, many housekeeping processes that this does in your body. And then they also looked at the difference between the two.
I'm sorry, Bart, we're getting close to the end, so maybe 30 seconds.
Sure. So
I
they
apologize.
yeah, absolutely.
It's a high-class problem.
Exactly. So they looked at the difference between these two forms and figured out that they could make a monoclonal antibody against the inflammatory form while leaving all of the necessary housekeeping functions alone, which is how you get efficacy without toxicity.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'd like to thank our special guest this evening, Dr. Martin Phillips. I'd also like to thank my co-host, Charlie Huntington. The next guest on Money Matters will be Michael DePupo, who's the president of Devon Financial Group. Thank you for watching this evening, and we'll see you again next time.